popcorn popped, drink in hand, ready to watch this instant classic. And I agree with you, it will be a high-scoring game. It's going to take a lot of effort from Villanova, especially with Miami team, who has kept it close to most of their opponents. Buffalo, 79-72, and against Wichita State, 65-57. If they keep their defense tough against Villanova's big men, I see Miami winning. But Villanova has a 4.5 point advantage, it's saying, in the odds. So I'm going to have to give it to Villanova.
Let's move over to the East. UNC Indiana. It's a classic matchup, obviously, of big-time programs meeting in the NCAA tournament. That's always going to be really big ratings for TV. North Carolina, obviously the second favorite to win it all, behind Kansas. Indiana, they won the regular season in the Big Ten, which was really impressive. They just got eliminated by Michigan in the conference tournament, which is why they got lower to a 5 seed, which is, for me, was way too low. They ran into a Kentucky team that honestly has been way too inconsistent this season. I'm not surprised Indiana had won that game. The key for Indiana to have a chance against North Carolina, Yogi Ferrell is going to have to play a really good game. He's going to have to not turn over the ball, make great decisions in the half-court set. That's what it's going to come down to in turnovers. North Carolina, the way they beat you is turnovers. And when they get on the fast break, they're arguably one of the 2 or 3 best teams left in the tournament, especially with their size. I mean, Justin Jackson, Bryce Johnson, they have way more than that. Marcus Page leading the show, really impressive there. For me, North Carolina is getting hot at the right time. They beat a Providence team that, again, I thought was going to get to the Final Four, and they just dismantled them in the second half. Going with UNC, it's going to be a close game. It's going to be, I wouldn't say a high-scoring game. I'll say low 70s, mid-70s at best, just because I think it's going to be really defensive late, but I like North Carolina. Tom?
Bryce Johnson. That is the man who needs to bring his game to this matchup against Indiana. It's going to be difficult, but if he can continue his offensive rebounds, his blocks, which are about 1.3 a game, his points, 16.6, and his field goal percentage, which is a low 60, but still good, I see them beating Indiana successfully, and I see it actually being in the high 70s. I'm actually going to give it a little bit more offense, a little bit more points, but I don't think Indiana is going to make it past the round of 16.
Notre Dame and Wisconsin is not a matchup that many people thought would occur, particularly Wisconsin. Again, as I mentioned, they're a team that got in to the tournament a little bit, inconsistent. They won a really low-scoring game against Pitt, 47-43. That's the lowest scoring game by far in the first round of the tournament, in the round of 64. And then they get by Xavier heroically. Again, Bronson Koenig, 2 major shots late. And then they run into a Notre Dame team that took care of a Michigan team that, again, and while inconsistent, was impressive and a little hot late in the season. And a Stephen F. Austin team that, took them down to the wire. That was a really good game if you were watching that one. The keys for Notre Dame, Zach August has to play huge minutes, and along with Demetrius Jackson, the point guard for that team. For Wisconsin, it's all in their backcourt. Nigel Hayes, Bronson Koenig, they're going to have to play really, really good basketball. They're going to have to play the Wisconsin's basketball. Again, slowing the pace down as seeing by the scores. If it's in the low 60s, mid 60s, I like Wisconsin. I just don't think that's going to happen. I like Notre Dame in this one. Tom?
Perfectly. Notre Dame is going to be the favorite, and I see them winning against Wisconsin. It's definitely going to come down to Augustine because he's the heart of that team, and if he gets down on himself or just is not using his head right, it's going to crumble. His team's going to crumble, and Wisconsin will win. I do believe that it will be a high-scoring game. Wisconsin, against their teams, they were very low. Wisconsin, 47 against Pittsburgh, 43. And then Wisconsin against Xavier, it was 66-63. Notre Dame's been in the 70 average area. So, once again, if Wisconsin's defense holds and it's a low-scoring game, I'll give it to Wisconsin, but I have Notre Dame moving on to the round of 8.
moving over to the West region, look, Oregon's made their name as a number 1 seed thus far. They beat out Holy Cross, which shouldn't be surprising there. They had a losing record going into the tournament. And they beat a St. Joe's team that, if any 1 seed was going to get upset in that first weekend, it would have been Oregon, just because they ran into a St. Joe's team that was physical. And Oregon, again, against physical teams, they do have a tough time against. So they're running into a Duke team that, again, is one of the hottest, has one of the hottest backcourts and front courts in the country. When you come to Grayson Allen leading that team, along with Brandon Ingram, who could arguably be the number 1 pick in this year's NBA draft, and his stock is clearly rising with each tournament game that he is impressive. The keys to the game, as I mentioned, for Duke, you already know who's going to happen. Grayson Allen, Brandon Ingram, they're going to have to play really well. I think Plumlee's also going to have to play major minutes as well. He cannot get into foul trouble against this Oregon size that has a lot of depth. While young talent, they are deep. And the key for Oregon is freshman Tyler Dorsey, making that big 3 late against St. Joe's. He's capable of taking over games when he needs to. It's going to be a close one. I do see this one going really high scoring, mid 80s, low 90s. Honestly, this is going to be a shootout. Gut feeling, I'm going Duke. It's going to be a close one. Oregon will be the first number 1 seed out of the tournament. I just like Duke's experience. The fact that they've won a national title with Allen. At least some of the players have been here. This will be Ingram's first time through this, and probably last time through this. But I like Duke's explosiveness and somewhat of experience in the tournament over Oregon's youth. Tom?
This one is like a pit in my stomach. It's choosing between 2 teams who have both been doing well in tournament and somewhat well in the regular season. But I will have to give it to Oregon. I do believe that they are going to be moving on to the Elite 8. As you said, Oregon has depth in their big men, and Plumlee has not been that great when it's come to defending the buckets. I know it was easy for him to get past NC Wilmington because most of their big guys fouled out, and they were just doing alley-oop after alley-oop, getting Plumlee to the basket. Against DL, it was much harder, and he got into foul trouble pretty quick. So I see Oregon trapping him and making sure that he's getting the fouls so that they knock him out. Because behind Plumlee, I don't see that many. I don't see big depth right behind him. So that's going to be the major factor right there, Plumlee. So I'm going to go with Oregon to the Elite 8.
Texas A&M and Oklahoma. This can also be a high-scoring game as well. I mean, you saw this game going to double overtime, 92-88 for Texas A&M. Again, it'll be an instant classic within the next 10 years. I mean, it's already an instant classic now, to be honest with you. I think that this game, it's not going to be close, to be honest. Texas A&M is a 3 seed, while great. Whoever thought Texas A&M would be the last SEC team in the tournament. Honestly, Oklahoma's been playing their best basketball. Blowing out CSU Bakersfield, and again going against a tough team in VCU that didn't let up all game. And Buddy Hield, man, you saw him take over that game against VCU. I expect him to do the same, no question. Again, they have them in my Final Four. Still have them in my Final Four, just as confident. Going with Oklahoma in this one, big blowout game over A&M. Tom?
Well, this is where I might actually disagree with my bracket that I picked. The way Texas A&M is playing, they're averaging 92 points per game in both round of 64 and round of 32. It just means that their offense is explosive right now, even though they have played against some weaker teams, Green Bay and Northern Iowa. When it comes to Oklahoma, they did have tougher challenges, including VCU, who was a decent matchup for them. They won 85-81. But as I said, I want to say Texas A&M is going to win, especially if it is a high-scoring game. I'm going to have to flip a coin on this.
Are you really going to flip a coin?
I have to. And it's going Oklahoma. Oklahoma will be going to the final, Elite 8.
Okay. All right, so moving on to the final one, final reach in the Midwest. This is going to be an interesting matchup. A team that's mainly focused on defense in Virginia versus an explosive offensive team in Iowa State. Iowa State has looked pretty good thus far, blowing out Iona and then blowing out Little Rock. So they've looked impressive. Georges Niang is going to carry this team. Again, they have a senior-laden lineup. That shouldn't surprise you, but they're going against a Virginia team that's also very senior-laden, led by Malcolm Brogdon, who's going to be an NBA draft pick once he comes out this year because he's a senior. Man, Virginia finally doesn't have Michigan State in to worry about anymore. They've been eliminated by them the last 2 years. This is Virginia's year to get to the Final Four. This defense wins championships, going Virginia.
I am going to go Virginia as well, not because it's in the final championship game for me, but it's also because Iowa State's offense, just their perimeter shooting, if they are falling, that's a good thing. But you can't always count on that. Sometimes you do need to go into the gut, into the paint, and get that bucket. So it's a big if for Iowa State for them to win, so that's why for them, that's a 30-70 that they'll actually win. So Virginia's offense and defense I see as more of a more rigorous task against Iowa State. So I'm going to give it to Virginia.
The last matchup that we're looking at, again, two teams that, let's be honest here, at the beginning of the tournament, we're probably not favored to get this far. Gonzaga, a team that's typically pretty good, gets to the Sweet 16 on occasion. But Syracuse, again, not a team that we thought at the beginning of the season should be in. They're the reason that the ACC has 6 teams in the elite, in the Sweet 16, which is a tournament record. It shows how impressive and deep the ACC is. This is going to be a good game. I think that for Syracuse, in order to win this game, they're going to have to rely on 2 players in particular. Tyler Roberson, I think he's going to have to play really well, and Malachi Richardson. I think those are 2 players that have to be effective. In order to win, they obviously are going to go with their zone defense, their 2-3 zone, known at Syracuse for many, many years. At the end of the day, I do like Gonzaga to get to the Elite Eight. I just think that Sabonis is going to be way too much for whatever is thrown down low for Syracuse. I just like them. Wiltshire will take over. McClellan's been playing phenomenal in this tournament thus far. So for me, I like Gonzaga. Tom?
Well, I'm a Gonzaga fan, even though I didn't see them actually going this far. So I'm not really helping my team out. But I am going to go with Gonzaga as well, and that means they'll probably lose because that's usually what happens. But Syracuse's team, as you said in the beginning with Jim Boeheim and his defense, how their zone defense, how familiar it is with teams going into the tournament, how tough it is to beat. But it will be difficult to be used when you get deeper and deeper into like the Elite Eight and Final Four. And that's where I think this will actually break down for Jim Boeheim. I see Gonzaga's offense miraculously beating Syracuse, but by only a few points. I see it being a very close game and a nail-biter to the finish. So I'm going Gonzaga.
Good. So now that we have our picks here, just going back to some games from the early round, I mean, honestly, it's just impressive that a lot of double-digit seeds are making it out of the first round. Most notably, again, let's go back to Michigan State here. Where, Tom, does this rank for you among all-time upsets? Let's put it on record here. Michigan State was supposed to be a number 1 seed. They dropped to a 2, and then they somehow get beat by a Middle Tennessee team that most people didn't see coming. A lot of people picked Michigan State to win it all. Where do you put that in your all-time upsets?
Just the way that the bracket was made this year, I can see now why the one anchor from ESPN actually said that these teams were chosen incorrectly, that they did not have the right placement. I can see that Michigan State should have been a little bit lower on the seeding and should not have actually